Okay, we're gonna need fabric, pins, scissors, thread, zip ties, and hook and eyes. This is to show the thickness of the fabric I chose. Using my mannequin, I mapped out what I'd like the corset to look like. I pinned the muslin on and traced the shapes that I had created with my tape. I then had the first draft of my pattern pieces. I then pinned those pieces back together, trimmed away the excess, and pinned it back onto the mannequin to make my final adjustments. Marking down my new adjustments with a pencil and ironing them out, I now had my new pattern pieces. So it was time to draw out my 1 centimeter seam allowance and trim away any excess. With all those pieces cut, I pinned it down onto more of the muslin and doubled up the pattern. So now I have all my pieces to create the corset. Pinning all those pieces right sides together, I was now ready to sew. I continued pinning right sides together and sewing for all the pieces. Placing it back onto my mannequin, I folded over the top seam allowance 1 centimeter. And now placing tape for where I wanted the sleeve, I was ready to cut out that piece as well. Now ironing all the seams flat and placing the sleeve where I'd like it, I was ready to try it on for my final test. Being happy with the fit and marking where I wanted the sleeves to be, I used a seam ripper to tear apart the shirt and use it as my final pattern. I was now ready to use my pattern pieces on the actual fabric I was going to use for the corset. So I cut all those out, flipped it over and mirrored it, and then cut out those pieces as well. Pinning those together, I was then ready to sew all the pieces. For the actual corset, I decided to do 2 layers of this, so I repeated this step twice, and making sure to iron all the seams flat. I cut out 4 straps to make it a thicker strap, and I doubled those up, and then I sewed them together. Right sides facing together, I placed the straps in between the 2 layers of the corset, and then I pinned that all together and sewed that straight. I then cut a few strips of fabric on the bias, so on the diagonal, so it had a little bit of stretch. After ironing that piece out, I'm going to fold it over onto itself and tuck away the raw edge. Pinning it down, making sure to include all the layers of the fabric, I'm going to sew along that seam. As you can see, for the front of the fabric, the seam is hidden, and for the back of the fabric, all the layers have been sewn through. I'm now going to do the same step that I just did to the neckline to the other side of the strap. This could be done before, but I decided as a last minute detail to do it. It would be a lot easier if you had done it before you attached the strap into the corset. Now you can try it on or place it onto your mannequin and decide where you'd like to place the backs of your straps. I did this by using my seam ripper, poking it through, pinning it, and trying it on for fit. Once I was happy, I pinned it on the inside and sewed it again. Now, to make sure that the 2 layers were matched up perfectly, I pinned them together, aligning their seams. Now I'm ready to create the channel for the boning. So sewing on each side of the seam, I'm going to create the channel, which will then allow me to slide my boning through, and I'm going to do that for all of the seams. With all my seams sewn and all my boning pushed through, I can then trim away all the excess. I cut out 2 rectangle pieces about 4 centimeters wide. I folded it over on the end and then sewed straight along, and this is where I'm going to attach my hook and eye. So folding again over onto itself and pinning through the seam, I'm going to sew that straight across as well. I'm now ready to sew my final bias strip onto the bottom of the corset. So creating a V shape with the 2 pieces, I'm going to iron that out and pin it right sides facing together and then just sew along straight. I did the same technique as used on the end pieces and folded the fabric over, and this will create a nicer finish. And then I'm going to do the exact same on the other side. again folding the piece over and just sewing straight across. Make sure to iron this out and then doing the same fold over pin technique that we've been using for all the other edges of the corset. We're now ready to hand sew the hook and eyes. I used pins to help me mark where I want to place all of them. And you're all done.